Howdy folks, once again, it's Calgary Vetterly, aka Antique Arms Almanac on YouTube. We've got a pretty rare piece here today. These are definitely in the unicorn type category of stuff you just don't really see anymore, really. I had to do a lot of research on what the hell this thing even was. I bought it thinking it was something else. I'll tell you that story in a minute. And I could only find instances of like 3 or 4 other being sold in like the last 20 years that I'm aware of. So, as the title states, this is a Luxembourg Gendarmerie contract model 1884 Nagant Revolver. And it's chambered in 9.4 millimeter Nagant, which is essentially identical to 9.4 millimeter Dutch cartridge. Dimensionally, they're about the same. And if you read the RCMP, Canadian Firearms entry, the FRN, the firearms reference number on this, it lists the caliber as 9.4 millimeter Dutch. So as far as the law enforcement in Canada is concerned, this is legally a 9.4 millimeter Dutch revolver. These are antique guns. They made them between 1884 and 1885 for these original guns. And numbers put them in the 190. That's the official number in the history books, revolvers made. However, there have been revolvers recovered with higher serial numbers. And the highest recovered gun, encountered today, at least, it's been recorded, was 206. So that could have happened for a number of reasons. More guns could have been made as supplementary to their inventory. Maybe they wanted some training examples. Maybe they wanted some ceremonial examples. Maybe Nagant, the first, few guns that they made were started in that serial number block from 1, and they retained them for whatever reason, and then they sent the rest to Luxembourg, and the serial numbers crept up into the 206 to 100 and whatever range. So best estimate on these things is between 190 guns and probably like 210 or 215, maybe 220, but I suspect it's probably around 210, or maybe 206 was the last one. It's hard to say, but sub 250 most likely, because the Gendarmerie, the actual membership of the Gendarmerie at the time was around 250, 255 men, and if that's a gun for everyone, you had a maximum of 250. However, the likelihood of us nowadays not having any examples above 206 seems highly unlikely. So probably 206, 210. There's probably 4 more guns that are made after that serial number, and that was it. But who's to say? Anyways, even more on that note of rarity, the hair. There's a hair. I got the hair. Don't worry. Anyways, the actual numbers that are floating around nowadays, probably very few. Like I said, I found like 4 sales. Like there was 2 auction sales that labeled this what it was, and Legacy Collectibles, I believe a few years ago, like 4 or 5 years ago, had like 2 of these for sale, and one of those is in the Ian McCullum Forgotten Weapons video. So if you look up an 1884 Nagant revolver video, I think there's going to be 3. There's Ian McCullum did a Forgotten Weapons video on this, and then he did a follow-up that mainly pertained to some corrections and the bayonet that came with this thing, because he never thought he'd find a bayonet, because they're even more rare than the guns. And then the third one will probably be this video, because you just don't see these anymore, really. They're obscenely rare, and probably most of them are sitting in private collections, and you basically need to wait for those people to kick the buckets and the families to put them up for auction. And that's how I got this gun. I bought this from an auction a while back. I can't remember if it's been a year or so, but about a year-ish. I've had this gun, and I've enjoyed it for a while. I haven't shot it. I've just oogled at it and kept it in its case. And this gun came out of a Texas auction. It came out of a collector's inventory, whatever you want to call it, his collection. He passed away, and typically what happens is, unless you will it to someone and you pass the hobby on, these tend to go up for auction. And I'm not really opposed to that. I think that's a good thing for the next generation of collectors to have an opportunity to purchase things like this. I mean, hence the fact that I got it. But this gun, the auction house had labeled it actually as an 1887 Nagant. And I looked at this, and I'll get my poker here. I looked at this, and I saw this unfluted cylinder. And I thought, the 87s all had fluted cylinders. This thing looks way too long to be an 1887. And everything was just a little bit different. It just didn't look right. And so I did some research into earlier Nagants, and I thought this was actually an 1883 Nagant, which is a revolver that they made for essentially enlisted men in the Belgian military. And it was essentially a cost-saving type gun where they didn't flute the cylinders. Things were kind of more simple, and the lock work in them is insanely simple, and those guns are actually single action only, right? Kind of like if you look at the 1895 Nagants, when the Russians adopted them, the officers got double actions, like this one is, and the enlisted men got single actions, and it wasn't until later that, you know, the communists took over and equalized everyone, that everyone got double actions. So I thought this was an 1883, so I made the mistake and bought it. And then I was doing some more research on it, and I was looking at just images on Google Images, and I was trying to just make sure I had bought what I thought I bought, and I didn't, because the 1883, this looks different, and the barrel, you know, just looked too long on this thing, and I thought, what the hell is this? Lo and behold, I found an identical picture, and it was actually from Legacy Collectibles listing for this thing. And it's a Luxembourg Gendarmerie Nagant. And I watched the videos from Forgotten Weapons, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is a rare bird, and I bought it completely by mistake. Now, the 1883s are not super common either, but these are ridiculously uncommon. These are just extremely rare. And I never personally thought I would own one, because I didn't even know about them until I had bought the thing and did some research on her. And so I'll give you a little bit of information on these, and essentially, they're just so hard to find, and I don't know how many are floating around nowadays. You know, really, you just don't see these guns anymore. And I'll just zoom in here. You should be able to read that. I'll even come in closer so you can really read that. So we have Brevet Nagant 184. That's a serial number. So this is actually of the original 190 serial number block, the run, I guess. One of the last guns ever made. There's a S with a star above it, and that is a Belgian proof inspector's mark. The serial number is on the barrel. It's also on a number of the other parts, like right here. It's on the back of the cylinder, I believe. And, oh, that loading gate is so tight. Hold on. I gotta do this. Oh, that loading gate spring is stiff as hell. 184, and there is some case hardening on that, but it's worn away. But let's get our wider focus. I talk about this thing. Essentially, Luxembourg has been occupied at least 2 times since this gun was made, both by the Germans and both during a world war. And the first one was, I guess, relatively bloodless in the First World War, as the military and I believe gendarmerie were confined to their barracks, and they just kind of let themselves be occupied. And a similar thing happened in World War II, but there actually was some fighting between the actual military of Luxembourg. So if I'm reading this from Wikipedia, and it does have a source. The source would be Thomas Nigel's Foreign Volunteered in the Allied Forces, 1939 to 1945. And so what it says here is that in 1940, which is when Nazi Germany occupied Luxembourg and invaded, the army numbered 13 officers, 255 gendarmes or gendarmerie members, and this is what they would have carried, and 425 soldiers. Now, I should probably maybe go into what a gendarmerie is. Essentially what they are is they're very similar to military police. They're a police force that is somewhat related to the military. And it's not a perfect facsimile as that they're military police, but that's essentially what they are, you know, for the purposes of this video. And So, I mean, it makes sense that they had roughly around 200 guns because they had 255 members. Now, not necessarily all their members needed to be armed officers on the street. They probably had people working desk jobs, jailers, and, you know, various other administrative jobs and officers. So, I don't think every member had a gun. And according to Wikipedia here, the losses on the German invasion was 7 soldiers. Now, I don't know if that includes gendarme or just the soldiers, were injured, wounded, and very quickly the Blitzkrieg took over and occupied Luxembourg. And there actually was armed resistance to the occupation in Luxembourg later on, because the Germans started conscripting Luxembourgers to join the Wehrmacht, and they didn't really like that, especially because back in 1939, Hitler proclaimed that if they ever took over Luxembourg, which they intended to do, that they would retain their sovereignty, which was complete BS, and they just became part of the larger Germany as far as the Germans were concerned. But I don't know how many of the gendarmerie fought against the Germans, if they fought at all, or they're all confined to quarters, if some of these firearms were funneled into the hands of the Allied resistance, if they were confiscated by the Germans. I just don't know. But I suspect all that occupation and turbulence did not help the numbers of these guns in existence. These just were swallowed by a black hole to some extent. You don't see them. I can count 4 that I've been able to find historically, right? And 2 of them were legacy collectibles, and I think they got the 2 out of the same collection. And one of those was extremely expensive, and it was like a 1-digit serial number. I think it was 4. But you're never going to see a 4-digit serial number on these because they didn't make that many. I think really the only other similar gun to this would be the 1883, which they made a few thousand or 1,200 or something like that. And then there's also a Brazilian model of this, very similar design to this. I believe it's also an 1883, and that's in essentially 44 Henry centerfire. And this particular gun is, like I said, in 9.4 millimeter Dutch. I believe you can make brass from 41 Magnum cases fairly easily. And for a bullet, you might just have to get a mold cut or find something that's reasonably close, or use a hollow base bullet of some sort. But I haven't attempted to fire this because I don't really want to. It's kind of too nice, and I don't really feel like putting black powder fouling in this thing and having to clean it a million times. So we'll look at this thing pretty close now that I've rattled on about history, theories, and information here. So, as previously shown, Brevet Nagant, which means Nagant Patent 184. We have the serial number there on the barrel. As I showed before on the loading gate, we have these Belgian Liege inspector's marks. And we'll take the cylinder out here for you. I'm just going to zoom out so we can see that. And we have this long barrel. And the reason that's so long is because there was actually a bayonet. As if you watch, I recommend you go watch the Forgotten Weapons videos on them, because they are pretty good. And essentially, the shape of this front sight is essentially shaped like a pawn, where you have a round circle target dot, more or less, on the side, and a sloped, angled section that basically is like a dovetail point to just clamp that little spike bayonet on it. So that's why they needed a long barrel. This barrel is 160 millimeters, which is 6.3 inches. So pretty long sucker. And they had to make that long so there was the clearance for this rod, ejector rod, which the knurling on that is basically perfect. And then what we do is this swings and pivots as if you were going to eject. It also gets out of the way. And see, there's the hole it goes into. And here is our cylinder pin. And I'm going to use this to get it off because this thing is tight. There we go. You know a cylinder pin is tight fitting when you need a tool to get it off. So there's our big fat hollow cylinder pin. Basically in perfect condition. It's got a little flat spring in it to give it tension. And it is serialized with the last 2 digits, 84. This is, as we showed, serial number 184. There's a little proof stamp on the front of this thing. And we have the loading gate in, which is also, as I showed you, serialized. Loading gate comes off, and this just comes right out. Don't have to mess around with the hand or the hammer. It just comes right out. And we're going to get a little oil on my nice white paper, but I don't really care. So there's another inspector's mark there, the S. And there's our liege proofing mark, ELG, which just basically means liege proof house. We have our ratchet teeth, which are sharp and defined. Achoo! Excuse me. Now we have our front of our cylinder here, and this is unfluted. And there is, I will show, let's just actually zoom in and focus right here. There's a fair bit of bluing here, but there's a lot of scratches. I think somebody really took a wire brush on this and kind of went ham, unfortunately. But other than that, the cylinder condition is quite nice. So, as you can see, just get some light going here and focus. Bam. You can still see the milling chatter from when they bored these out. And really the only chamber that has any sort of marks in it are those like 3. This one on the right has some very minor corrosion, which is pretty surface level stuff. And the fact that, you know, when you have a black powder gun and you have bluing, you can see it's very blue on the front of a cylinder face with black powder on the muzzle end, it's probably not in too bad a shape. This is in like excellent condition. Just the finish is coming off on it. And then we have the bore, which I'm going to have to take this off the mount to look at in a moment. But before we do that, we'll have just a peek here in the water table and whatnot. As you can see, there's just some fuzzies there. That's just some fuzz from the case. Here is our hand. There's our hand. And I'm just going to close the gate here, which is, of course, serial numbered 184. And we have our double action hammer, which I just fired single action. And unlike the Model 1878 models, this has the improved lock work. It's the same as the 1887 and the 7887, I believe. And you have a rebounding hammer. See, I remove my finger from the trigger. Bam, the gun is fired. And there's our firing pin protruding. As soon as you release the trigger, the hammer goes in the rebound position, and we're basically not sitting on a primer. So that's a really nice feature. Look here at the wood while we're in close. The metal overall is pretty good. There's some fingerprints. I'll polish this up later with a microfiber and get all the residue off it, but it's going to have some handling residue here. We have pretty sharp and clean checkering. Same on the back strap here. On the right side, the grip, and even on the front strap, there's wood here. It's very fine cut checkering. Flip her over to this side. Ooh, ran into the mount there. This thing is so long. We have some minor pits there on that flat spring, and that's the loading gate spring. And there we have A. What that stands for is actually the order at which you disassemble it. You go A, and you take this off, and the whole side plate comes off, and you take the actually the grip screw comes off when you remove the side plate. It's a pretty neat little system here. And any other markings that we should be aware of? Not really. No, these things are pretty sparse for markings. And the only way to actually know this is a Luxembourg contract gun or anything related to Luxembourg is you got to take the grip panels off, and there's a little L inside underneath this wood with a star on it. And if you watch the Forgotten Weapons video, you'll see that. And we have our lanyard ring, which if you know anything about antique or military historical firearms, lanyard rings are like one of the most commonly lost items, right? Because they're always being moved around and twisted, and sometimes it's just a little screw or a peened rivet that holds this whole thing in under the weight of the gun, and they're missing. This original lanyard ring, it didn't go anywhere. And this is how, see, that's basically how your ejector rod sits right there in the center there. This gun, we'll have a look at the bore, actually. We'll do that next. So let's just see if I can get in here. Look at this. I'm running into the camera on my mount. So I'll take it off the mount, and we'll have a look at the bore here. So bear with me. And doop-a-doop-a-doo. Don't mind the mess. Wow, I can see a lot of light. I don't even have the light on it yet. There we go. As you can see, she's shiny, and that bore is pretty sharp. You can see the rifling quite definitively. It's basically no corrosion in there. That's just a little piece of fuzz, essentially. So, just pop this back here for a minute. So, yeah, that is the 1887 Nagant. I'll put it back together, and then I shall bid you adieu. But this gun, all the mechanics are just excellent. The gun is in pristine condition. I don't think you can actually come in from that side. I think you have to come in. Yeah, that's right, you have to come in because there's this cut right there. See that? It has to come in from the loading side. There we go. And once you close the gate, it's not going anywhere. Make sure your ejector rod is out of the way. And just wiggle this back in there. Make sure that's aligned. Click. There she is. And I will dry fire this just once in double action. As you can see, the firing pin is in basically perfect condition. Rebound hammer. And, ooh, that's a tight, long spring. This gun basically handles like new. It's just got some wear to it. And I mean, hey, it's from like 1884, 1885. It's been through 2 world wars, 2 German occupations, and a long trip over to Texas and eventually up here to Canada. So it's been around the block. I think it's in pretty nice shape. Mechanically, the gun is like brand new. It's essentially excellent, mechanically excellent. The gun, all the springs are tight. It times perfectly. It locks up perfectly. It indexes perfectly. You could definitely shoot this gun, or at least I would shoot this gun without any concern. But you know, if you're going to load your own 9.4 millimeter Dutch black powder spec ammo, that's up to you, and you got to clean it after, or I'll hunt you down. Not with the gun, like the chopstick. So I will bid you adieu, and I hope you enjoyed looking at this thing. I know I certainly did, and see you next time.